Republican State Representative Matt Shaheen of Prosper, thank you so much, and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me, Jack.
You bet. So, as you know, you are celebrating a legal victory today after the U.S. Supreme Court this morning upheld your bill, which became law, requiring pornographic websites to verify the ages of their customers, their users. So, talk to us. Were you surprised at all by this?
Not really. I had the opportunity to sit in the Supreme Court building during the oral arguments in January, and it seemed favorable the way the questions were going. But look, this was a clear victory for Texas children. It was pornographic websites against our Texas families, and the Supreme Court sided with our Texas families. So it's a great day for Texas and protecting our children from this smut.
And so, how is this going to work? What exactly does the law spell out now that it's gotten the official green light?
Yeah, so look, it's actually a very reasonable process. The legislation just states that pornographic websites, and it defines pornographic websites as any site that has over a third of its content that's sexual in nature. They just have to do an age verification process. The legislation is very flexible with respect to how they do that. They can do it themselves, or they can engage a third party. So it's very reasonable. Age verification happens all across the internet today. So we're just going to require it on these pornographic websites to protect our children.
And so, how now? I mean, because it hasn't been able to go into effect, right, because of this
That's
uh,
right.
court
Yeah,
case. So,
that's right.
how quickly will it be allowed to go into effect? Is it immediate now?
Yeah, I mean, Supreme Court ruling is in effect. So, websites, if they want to be available to Texans, they have to start this age verification process. But I will tell you, when the legislation passed, that when the governor signed it into law, we had over a dozen pornographic websites that instead of taking these reasonable steps to protect children, they decided not to make themselves available in the state of Texas, which is perfectly fine by me. So I guess what's going to happen is I think these websites will continue not to make themselves available in Texas, but it is the law in the state of Texas as well as more than a dozen other states, and they have to begin abiding by it.
And how does the state enforce it? How does the state police it and make sure that kids can't access this and that companies aren't taking advantage?
Yeah. So what the legislation does, it gives the attorney general the power to pursue these websites, and so the way it works is it's every day that they don't do the age verification process, there's a penalty, and then for each instance where a child is exposed to this graphic, inappropriate material, the attorney general can assess a fine as well, and we limited it up to $250,000. So it's on the AG to begin accepting any types of complaints that his office might receive and to pursue those matters.
Now, there were privacy concerns
Mm-hmm.
expressed throughout the court case, and usually I know people are very in tune to that. And so, how did you take that into consideration when coming up with this legislation?
Absolutely. So we also mandated in the statute that uh, the information that's collected to do the age verification, it cannot be stored. It's not allowed to be stored. So once the age verification process is complete, that data is gone to protect the individual's identity. So we did take that into account.
And are there methods to ensure that? In other words, is that something that the state has authority to go in and check?
Yeah. So if there's any type of complaint about that, then it can be submitted to the attorney general's office and it can be investigated. And if it is in fact found that there's a violation of that, that statute can be carried out by the attorney general as well. So yes, there are protections for that. But again, this type of age verification, as far as the data not being saved, it happens probably hundreds of thousands, if not a million times on the internet daily across the globe. So again, privacy matters have been taken into consideration and people's information will be protected.
Now, there was at least one other age verification bill, I believe, that was passed this session. What impact do you think the Supreme Court ruling will have as far as other potential bills coming forward or that were passed?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question because this is the first time that the Supreme Court has ruled on age verification, protecting children from sexually explicit materials. And so, yeah, there's different ways to tackle this. So there's also legislation with respect to mandating filters on iPhones and Google phones and the like. And you also have legislation that it did pass the Texas legislature this session with respect to age verification for your app stores as well. So, in the process of being able to go to an app store and download your different applications, there's going to be an age verification, although my understanding is that's being challenged as well.
So that could be a separate case, although who knows? With this ruling today, that may ultimately put the kibosh on it.
Yeah, it's this case is very unique in that during the oral arguments, some of the justices were asking a question that the pornographic websites they just couldn't answer. The justices were merely asking if it's okay, if it's not a burden to ask for identification when you're visiting a strip club or any kind of sexually oriented business today, if it's not a burden to ask for an ID in a brick and mortar sex site, why is it a burden when you're with respect to being on the internet? And the pornographic websites they just couldn't answer that question. So I think you'll see that this is a standard that has been set. Again, the objective here is to protect children, and I think you just have a handful of pornographic websites that don't care about protecting children. Quite frankly, I think they want these children to be exposed to their trash. And again, this is just a big victory for Texas children and Texas families.
And it'll be interesting to see if, the case that you mentioned before about the app stores, the age verification for app stores, which did pass in the legislature this past session, that will, what kind of how far could that go in the courts and be challenged? Because that seems a little bit broader than this very narrow scope.
You're right. It is broader. The thought process with the age verification with the App Store was, an App Store has probably over 1 million apps. All right. So you do the age verification at the application level? So you're literally having to check on 1 million different applications to see if they're doing age verification, or do you do that through that one focal app store? Right. And so there's a handful of app stores that are out there, and it's just more a reasonable approach. But you're right, though it is broader, and so we'll see how that plays out. I have no doubt. Like I said earlier, I believe that's being challenged already. I don't. I think when you look at the victory that we had today with HB 1181 and the victory we had with the Supreme Court, I think the challenges to the App Store age verification will also be victorious. But we'll just see how that plays out.
State Representative Matt Shaheen of Prosper, thank you so much as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.